Could I just ask you to tell me who you are and what you do?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm Terry Glavin. I am a columnist for the National Post and the Ottawa Citizen. I am a senior fellow with the Raoul Wallenberg Institute for Human Rights. And I have written that Year of the Graves retrospective that you're so angry about.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Let's start with common ground, where I believe that you and I and the historical record and reality all agree. Canada's residential school system was cultural genocide.
You've been reading my stuff. Very good.
Okay, so we're on the same page there.
Yeah, yeah, more or less. Whatever. I mean, yeah, sure. Yep.
So, no dispute, this was an abusive, unjust, and for many children, many children, a fatal system. You have been emphatic that you are not a residential school denier. I have that right?
Yeah. In fact, if I'm a residential school denier, so are all of the chiefs in all of these local events that the media got so wrong.
Okay, well, we'll get into that, but that is, I think, important to establish. And it would be hard, I think, to have, like, a conversation.
Well, come on. I mean...
I don't mean to offend you.
Are you serious?
Well...
You don't think that's an insult to my intelligence? Are you a residential schools denier?
I think that it is an offensive question to ask any person who I would normally start with the assumption that they are not a residential school denier, that they are not a Holocaust denier. But
then why do you ask me? Are you starting from the assumption that I am?
No, I'm dealing in a reality where if we look online, there are dozens and dozens of people, dozens and dozens of Indigenous people who are saying that about you. And you are saying that is
I don't know that that's true. There's all kinds of crazy people on Twitter. But I'm glad that you're concerned about not giving a voice to genocide deniers, because that's exactly what you did last July. And you slobbered on his slippers. And you also lied about me on that very program. Well done, Jesse.
Terry.
Well done.
Terry, I'm really sorry if that was a really offensive question to you. But
no, you're not.
I'm not.
No, of course you're not.
I'm not sorry about that.
Are you sorry about what you said about me last July? Are you sorry about lying about me last July? When you said that I deny residential school graves?
What is it?
When you took an expose that I did and that Jorge Barrera from Aboriginal People's Television Network did of a defrocked United Church priest. And you said, see, he was right, you were wrong. A nutcase who was last seen traipsing around Vancouver, threatening to arrest people administering COVID injections. You called... This is you, Jesse. By the way, you're going to call me to account? Who holds you to account?
Everybody.
Oh, well, everybody holds me to account too. Maybe Jesse Wente was right. You know, I've offered to share a platform with him if he wants to say mean things about me too. Maybe he's right. Maybe you're not qualified to challenge me and confront me about all of the terrible things I've written in Year of the Graves. Maybe he's right.
Maybe I'm not, but here we are. I don't know what kind of conversation you want to have, Terry, but there's a certain kind of conversation that I invited you to.
I don't like it when people take this tone with me that you have taken on more than one occasion. All right? Now you might be able to think you can bully or frighten other people. But I'm sorry. You're not qualified. You're not qualified to take me on matters of journalism, on the question of residential schools, or any other subject that might come up in our conversation. So let's get that straight. Let's get that as a common ground.
I'm not sure that I'm the one doing the bullying right now, Terry. I asked you here.
Poor dear.
I asked you here, and I invited you to talk to me about a piece of writing that was published on the front page of the flagship newspaper of the biggest newspaper chain in Canada, and I invited you to hold it up to scrutiny, whether it's whether I'm capable of doing so or not, you agreed to that.
If you want to challenge me on something that I've said in the past, which I don't have...
I just did. Now get on with it.
What kind of conversation do you want to have? Because I want to have a conversation about your article.
Well, go for it.
Are those
I've
ground
invited
rules?
you. How many times do you want me to... Come on, Jesse, let's have you. Challenge me. Confront me. Do you want to establish what other common ground we have? Maybe you want to do that. I don't know what you want to do.
Why don't you calm down and you'll find out?
You can't invite me on your program and tell me that we're going to have this conversation on your terms. Now go ahead.
Most media and most Canadians understand the events of the last year to be a long overdue reckoning.
That the nation, through the media, government, and the population, have been experiencing a long overdue reckoning. Those are the words we hear.
Over the legacy and the reality of what happened in residential schools.
But that's not how you...
So I don't know if that's what most Canadians believe, but fair enough. Go ahead.
I think it's we're not gonna... It's gonna take us a lot longer than 40 minutes if you dispute things like that. I think that's a pretty common way that it was described.
Yes, it was. That doesn't mean it's a common way of most Canadians understanding what happened last year, but go ahead.
You had a different series of descriptions for it. You called the response over the last year the craziness, the uproars, utterly surreal eruptions, national convulsions,
paroxysms
of shame, guilt, and rage that swept across the country. So I think it's fair to say that you've taken a pretty negative view of those responses.
Yeah, I take a pretty negative view of a bunch of white know-nothings talking over Aboriginal people and what they actually said. I take a very dim view of a bunch of white people splashing red paint on Queen Victoria's statue and knocking over a statue of Captain Cook, of all people, and throwing it into Victoria Harbour over the express opposition of the local Esquimalt, Songhees, Saanich, Sartlip, Sakem, and Pockwitchin tribes, who were disgusted with it. Yeah, I take a dim view of that. And the same kind of thing happened in Winnipeg, and Murray Sinclair took a similarly dim view. Yeah, I do take a dim view of that kind of thing.
I challenge the accuracy with which you described what happened.
What you wrote...
Where?
I will, if you'll let me finish. If
your readers want to know what was this craziness, what were these convulsions, this uproar, this terrible thing that happened in Canada that Terry's talking about, you have an answer for them. You say that these eruptions were eruptions of violence.
That waves of violence spread across the country.
Waves of violence.
That's what you wrote.
Those words?
Yes, you did.
Waves of violence.
You used the media and the government chose to unleash a wave of violence.
And you describe this as a national phenomenon.
I'm using your words.
What was this violence?
Where did... Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would dispute that it's pretty violent to vandalize dozens of churches and burn down several churches, beloved of the indigenous communities in which they had stood. But I actually did not use the term waves of violence.
You said that the media and the government chose...
Show me where the word waves doesn't even appear.
I'm relying on your articles in the National Post and on what you wrote on your Substack.
Well, I thought you were challenging me on the Year of the Graves.
I'm challenging you on what you wrote on this topic.
Well, make up your mind.
Well,
because if you want to change what's being challenged here, again, I'm going to challenge you.
You don't want to be held responsible for
allowing a genocide denier on your program last July and having a rare old time with him and libeling me. So are we going to talk about the Year of the Graves project or not?
Terry, you wrote a consequential piece that has inspired a ton of commentary from yourself as well as other people. You want to limit this conversation to what's in that article, and you don't want to be held accountable for what you've written elsewhere on that about that article. You don't like. Is that because
look? Okay, fine. You're changing the agreement. You're changing the rules. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So if you're a
reader, and you did write about violence in the National Post piece, that's what you said happened in Canada was violence. And if your reader
thought that meant that human beings were hurt, thank you for the clarity, because you were talking about inanimate objects.
Correct?
I don't even know what article you're referring to. So whatever. Okay. I'll pretend, or I'll just get on with it, Jesse.
Well, I'm talking about hyperbole. I'm talking about rhetoric. I'm talking about an overstatement about.
You think it's hyperbole to describe what happened to all of those little churches on all those little reserves that were built by the ancestors of the indigenous people there, and the burning of those churches that caused nothing but grief and pain to those indigenous communities. I'm not allowed to use the word violence.
I think you misled your readers.
Next issue. Come on, let's have you. Challenge me.
What's the right way for people to respond when they finally recognize that their country perpetrated a form of genocide on children?
Because you don't seem to think that it was appropriate, the way that and you use the actions of a few people.
What are you asking me? What's
you
the
define.
What's the right way to respond when somebody discovers that their government had committed acts of genocide, if you like, against the indigenous people of the country?
What's correct?
Because you seem to be very judgmental about what the wrong way is.
I won't tell you what the correct line should be, but I will tell you how I would respond to such a person. Where the hell have you been? That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Grown-ups expressing all this shock and surprise that indigenous people were treated so badly in these residential schools. Where the hell have they been?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would respond. Next.
I think that it is absolutely accurate that a lot of people had opportunities to know about this beforehand, had opportunities to face it and reckon with it beforehand. But the simple fact of the matter is that we didn't.